The diamond gleamed, a cold star reflecting the ballroom's opulent glow, as Cassandra Vane, the venture capitalist queen of the sector, knelt before my husband, Silas Caldwell. Her voice, usually a silken whisper of influence, sliced through the air, sharper than any blade, amplified by the discreet microphone pinned to her lapel. "Silas, darling, will you finally leave your obsolete partner and marry me?" My heart didn't just break, it shattered into cosmic dust, knowing his inevitable yes would incinerate everything I had poured my soul into, every innovation, every dream for AetherPulse Innovations. Just moments earlier, I had floated through the opulent Galactic Frontiers Gala, the annual event celebrating AetherPulse's groundbreaking advancements, feeling a familiar hum of unease beneath my smile. My fingers, usually dancing across quantum algorithms, now traced the delicate silk of my custom-designed sapphire gown. It was an anniversary gift from Silas, or so I believed, a gesture to mark our 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building an empire from a whisper of an idea. But the silk felt less like a celebration and more like a shroud, clinging to a truth I had only just begun to unravel. Silas's smartwatch, usually a beacon of his impeccable timing and efficiency, had been left carelessly on our shared nightstand. A flash of light from its screen had caught my eye, a notification that pulled me in like a black hole's gravity. What I read was a chilling constellation of messages from Cassandra Vane, a name that had lately become a dissonant chord in the symphony of my life. Their exchanges weren't about strategic partnerships or investment rounds, they were a meticulous blueprint for a corporate execution, with my public humiliation as the central spectacle. Eleanor's emotional breakdown will justify the ownership restructuring we discussed. The proposal will happen during your keynote. Cassandra's words, stripped of any pretense, laid bare a 6-month campaign of calculated deceit. My anniversary gift, a vintage celestial-themed locket I'd spent weeks researching, now felt like a cruel joke, a tangible symbol of how completely I had misjudged my role in tonight's performance. It wasn't a celebration of our union, it was my farewell tour, carefully orchestrated for maximum impact and minimum resistance. I stood in our sprawling penthouse suite, the city lights of Neo-Olympus glittering like distant galaxies outside our floor-to-ceiling windows. The silence of the vast space, usually a comfort, now felt heavy, suffocating. Silas, oblivious, hummed a cheerful tune from the bathroom, adjusting the bow tie of his bespoke tuxedo. He was a picture of a man on the precipice of a triumph, unaware that his digital breadcrumbs had led me to the edge of an abyss. The messages on his device painted a vivid picture of manipulation, a cold, clinical plot to dismantle my marriage and seize AetherPulse Innovations, the company I had built from nothing with my expertise in quantum physics and advanced algorithmic architecture. My fingers instinctively went to the small, velvet box containing the locket, a piece I had chosen because Silas once spoke of admiring ancient celestial maps. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. While I curated a gift born of love, he was planning my professional demise with a woman who saw our marriage as merely a business impediment to be surgically removed. "Aris, have you seen my cufflinks?" Silas's voice, radiating easy confidence, pierced the silence. He emerged from the bathroom, his charm as polished as his patent leather shoes. I retrieved the platinum cufflinks, custom engraved with the AetherPulse orbital logo, from his jewelry box. My hands remained steady, a testament to years of maintaining composure under pressure, even as an emotional supernova erupted within my chest. These cufflinks, once a symbol of our shared aspirations during AetherPulse's nascent days, when partnership meant equality, now felt like props in a staged drama. Our penthouse, a testament to 10 years of meticulously curated success, spoke of our rise to the zenith of the aerospace tech world. Custom-designed furniture, art installations inspired by nebulae, and panoramic views of Neo-Olympus, every element told the story of AetherPulse's meteoric ascent. Yet, what these elegant surroundings could not convey was the undeniable truth hidden within our fortified home safe. I owned 68% of AetherPulse, while Silas held a mere 32%. This distribution wasn't arbitrary, it was based on my grandmother Elara Santos's inheritance, which funded our initial operations, and my innovations that generated every single credit of our current multi-billion credit valuation. Elara Santos, my grandmother, had been a pioneer, working 3 demanding jobs to build a small quantum computing consultancy in the 1970s. She left me her life savings, tucked away with a handwritten note in Old Spanish, para mi nieta Aris, construí algo que import y nunca dejes que nadie se atribuya el crédito por tu trabajo. For my granddaughter Aris, build something that matters and never let anyone take credit for your work. Her words, once a guiding light, now echoed in my mind like a mournful dirge, a crushing realization that I had inadvertently violated her most vital lesson, even as I honored her financial legacy. The woman who had sacrificed everything to pave the way for future generations would be devastated to know her granddaughter had become a ghost in her own success story, her brilliance overshadowed by a carefully constructed facade. The morning routine continued with practiced choreography. Silas reviewed his keynote speech for tonight's investor gala, his presentation notes copies of my exhaustive research, annotated with explanations I had meticulously written to help him grasp concepts he would present as his own breakthrough innovations. The hyperquantum entanglement architecture represents a paradigm shift in intergalactic communication protocols, he rehearsed, stumbling slightly over terminology I had taught him during countless late-night study sessions. The technical foundations of his public reputation, his very persona as a visionary, rested entirely on algorithms I had developed during 18-hour coding marathons, while he navigated strategic partnerships at exclusive conferences. His charisma a shield for his intellectual deficit. My reflection in our bedroom mirror revealed a woman transformed by knowledge, yet one I barely recognized. Dr. Aris Thorne, quantum astrophysicist and software architect, reduced to a supporting actress in her own professional biography. The sapphire gown I wore, a designer creation purchased with discretionary funds from patent royalties bearing my name as the primary inventor, felt heavy. Tonight, I would attend our company's most pivotal event as Silas Caldwell's wife, not as the architect of the innovations being celebrated. Our walk-in closet, a veritable archive, contained 10 years of costumes for various corporate performances, each garment meticulously chosen to project the image of a supportive spouse rather than the brilliant entrepreneur I truly was. Board meeting attire that conveyed professional competence without threatening masculine authority, conference outfits that suggested technical knowledge while maintaining appropriate deference to Silas's leadership. Tonight's gown was the culmination of this careful image management, elegant enough for photographs, yet ensuring I remained decorative, never central to any business discussions. Silas emerged from the bathroom, looking every inch the successful tech executive. His appearance, refined through professional styling and expensive tailoring, exuded an air of unassailable confidence. "You look beautiful tonight, Aris," he said, the compliment carrying the hollow ring of automatic politeness rather than genuine appreciation. His eyes held no trace of guilt or hesitation, suggesting either remarkable acting ability or a complete compartmentalization of his betrayal. I wondered how long he had been practicing this performance, how many mornings he had looked at me, planning my destruction. The vintage locket, still in its box, represented more than an anniversary gift. It symbolized 10 years of misplaced trust and willful blindness to mounting evidence of exploitation. Our early conversations, once vibrant and electrifying, had spanned hours as we debated technical possibilities and business strategies. His initial curiosity about my ideas had matched my boundless enthusiasm for collaboration. But gradually, those exchanges had transmuted into one-sided tutorials, where I patiently explained complex concepts while he nodded, taking notes for future presentations. The evolution had been so subtle, so insidious, that I had mistaken intellectual theft for partnership, until tonight's brutal revelation made the pattern impossible to ignore. Documents in our home safe told a different story than the one Silas would present to investors tonight. The incorporation papers, which I had meticulously drafted using my unparalleled legal expertise, clearly established my majority ownership of AetherPulse Innovations. Patent filings meticulously detailed the innovations that generated our $310 million credit annual revenue, each bearing my name as the primary inventor. Bank records unequivocally showed my grandmother's inheritance as the initial funding that had transformed Silas's ambitious, yet nebulous, ideas into operational reality. These documents represented mathematical truth in a world increasingly dominated by perception management and public relations campaigns. The surreal atmosphere of preparing for my own corporate funeral, while maintaining the facade of marital harmony, was a dizzying performance of its own. I applied my makeup with mechanical precision, each stroke of foundation and lipstick contributing to the image of the devoted wife attending her husband's professional triumph. The woman in the mirror looked flawless for tonight's performance, elegant, supportive, and completely unprepared for the systematic destruction Cassandra Vane had orchestrated with clinical efficiency. My compad displayed 17 missed calls from my assistant, Dr. Lena Kim, along with urgent text messages about critical technical issues requiring my immediate attention. The Hyperquantum Entanglement Optimization Project, our flagship initiative, was showing anomalies that could jeopardize our next product launch, complex algorithmic problems that required an expertise Silas simply did not possess. Yet tonight, I would sit in the audience while he accepted accolades for innovations he could neither debug nor replicate, his reputation built entirely on foundations I had constructed through sleepless dedication to mathematical elegance and computational breakthrough. The elevator descent to our building's suborbital parking garage offered final moments of precious solitude before the performance began. Silas, oblivious to my inner turmoil, chatted animatedly about investor expectations and networking opportunities, his excitement genuine as he anticipated professional validation and expanded business relationships. I clutched the velvet box containing the locket, understanding that I was about to witness the culmination of months of meticulous planning, designed to transfer ownership of my life's work to people who viewed talent as a commodity to be acquired, rather than a partnership to be honored. Our self-driving shuttle glided away from the building, heading towards the Meridian Grand Spire, where 300 of Neo-Olympus's most influential business leaders would gather to celebrate another year of AetherPulse's unparalleled success. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as we traveled towards what I now understood was not an anniversary celebration, but a carefully orchestrated corporate coup, disguised as entertainment. The perfect life we had constructed together was about to reveal itself as an elaborate performance, funded by my innovation and protected by my willingness to remain invisible in my own success story. The shuttle glided through Neo-Olympus's gleaming financial district while Silas's compad continued its relentless buzzing. Each notification created a small flinch in my chest as I recalled the messages I had discovered. The device lay between us on the plush leather seat like a loaded weapon, its screen lighting up with incoming texts that he quickly silenced, without even a glance. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, suggesting this had become routine behavior rather than tonight's anomaly. Marcus just sent the final guest list, Silas offered, though I noticed he hadn't actually opened any messages to verify this claim. His voice carried a forced casualness that made my skin crawl, the tone of someone working strenuously to appear normal while managing multiple deceptions. The past month had been saturated with these small lies, innocent explanations for behaviors that had shifted in ways I could no longer ignore. The hushed comm calls had begun 3 weeks ago, conversations that abruptly terminated whenever I entered our kitchen or home observatory. Silas would claim they were investor relations or board discussions, but his body language suggested something far more personal. He would lean forward, his voice dropping to intimate tones usually reserved for private moments between spouses. When I pressed him about specific calls, his explanations became vague and contradictory, filled with details that did not align with actual business schedules or meeting calendars. Cassandra has some truly innovative ideas about expanding our celestial market reach, Silas continued, his enthusiasm for her business acumen creating that familiar tightness in my chest. The way he spoke her name had evolved over recent weeks, from professional respect to something approaching reverence. Cassandra Vane commanded attention in any room she entered, her reputation as Neo-Olympus's most successful venture capitalist built on aggressive acquisition strategies and ruthless business instincts. Silas's growing fascination with her investment philosophy had begun innocuously enough, but now colored almost every conversation about AetherPulse's future direction. The preparations for tonight's gala had revealed yet another layer of concerning behavior. Silas had tried on 3 different suits this afternoon, soliciting my opinion with a nervous energy that seemed entirely disconnected from celebrating our anniversary. His questions fixated on which outfit would photograph best under ballroom lighting, which tie would complement stage lighting during keynote presentations. The obsessive attention to visual details suggested he was preparing for a performance rather than a partnership, considering how his appearance would be perceived by specific audience members rather than how he felt wearing clothes selected for our shared celebration. Did you know Cassandra started her first enterprise at 24? Silas asked, though I had not requested biographical information about his new business idol. His compad buzzed again, and this time I caught a glimpse of her name on the screen before he quickly turned the device face down. The frequency of their communication had increased dramatically, messages arriving at all hours, including weekends and early mornings when professional correspondence would be highly unusual. Our shuttle passed the AetherPulse Innovation Spire, 24 floors of office space housing the company I had built with algorithms designed during countless sleepless nights. The irony of viewing my life's work from the backseat of a vehicle purchased with revenues from my innovations was not lost on me, especially knowing that tonight would celebrate achievements I had created while someone else claimed the recognition. The employee dynamics at AetherPulse had shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways over the past month. Conversations halted abruptly when I approached groups of staff members, their sudden silence suggesting discussions about topics I was not meant to overhear. My own technical team seemed distracted during project reviews, their usual enthusiasm for breakthrough developments dampened by undercurrents of tension I could not identify. Dr. Lena Kim, my assistant and one of our most talented quantum engineers, had been asking careful questions about my long-term plans for the company, her inquiries feeling more like intelligence gathering than casual conversation. Marcus Bellwether, Silas's executive assistant, had become particularly nervous during our brief interactions. His usual professional demeanor had been replaced by awkward avoidance of eye contact and stammered responses to simple questions about meeting schedules or document preparation. Just yesterday, I had caught him quickly closing his datapad screen when I entered Silas's office. His flustered explanation about confidential investor materials failed to explain his obvious discomfort with my presence. The investor materials for tonight's gala had arrived without my review or approval, a stark departure from our established protocol that required both co-founders to sign off on strategic presentations. The documents contained proposals for restructuring company ownership in ways that would diminish my visible role while elevating external partnerships with venture capital firms. Cassandra Vane's investment group featured prominently in these plans, with suggestions for expanded cooperation that would essentially transform AetherPulse from an independent startup to a subsidiary operation. She really understands the vision we have for scaling our operations, Silas said, his choice of pronouns revealing how completely he had begun to exclude me from future planning. The transition from I to we when discussing Cassandra's involvement suggested a partnership that extended far beyond professional consultation, into something approaching shared ownership of decisions that should unequivocally require my input as the majority stakeholder. The vintage locket rested in its velvet box on my lap. The gift that had once represented 10 years of marriage now felt more like evidence of my own naivety, a symbol of my misplaced devotion. Silas's distracted responses to my attempts at conversation throughout the day had created a hollow atmosphere in our penthouse, as if we were already living separate lives while sharing the same physical space. His answers to direct questions about tonight's events had been evasive, filled with vague references to surprises and special presentations that explicitly excluded me from the planning processes. "Will you be sitting with the board members during dinner?" I asked, testing whether he would provide honest information about seating arrangements that had been finalized weeks ago. His hesitation before answering confirmed my suspicion that tonight's logistics had been designed around conversations I was not meant to participate in or overhear. The shuttle turned onto Constellation Avenue, bringing us closer to the Meridian Grand Spire, where 300 guests were already gathering for what I now understood was not merely a celebration of company success. Silas checked his appearance in the partition mirror one final time, his reflection showing a man preparing for a performance rather than an anniversary recognition. The nervous energy radiating from his carefully composed exterior suggested tonight held significance far beyond what he had shared with me. My compad displayed 3 missed calls from Dr. Lena Kim, along with urgent text messages about critical technical issues that would normally demand my immediate attention. The hyperquantum entanglement optimization project showed anomalies that could affect our next product launch, problems that demanded expertise Silas did not possess, despite his willingness to accept credit for solutions I would provide. The timing of these technical crises felt suspicious, creating emergencies that would justify my absence from key social interactions during tonight's event. The weight of the locket box in my hands had transformed from anticipation to dread as I recognized how completely I had misunderstood my role in tonight's performance. 10 years of marriage had taught me to read Silas's moods and motivations, but recent weeks had revealed depths of deception I had never imagined possible. The man sitting beside me had become a stranger, his motivations and loyalties shifting in ways that threatened everything I had built through my own innovation and determination. As our shuttle approached the Spire's circular drive, I realized that tonight would not mark an anniversary celebration, but rather the culmination of careful planning designed to restructure my relationship with both my husband and my company. The perfect life we had constructed together was about to reveal itself as elaborate preparation for my systematic removal from my own success story. The Meridian Grand Spire circular driveway bustled with valet droids directing luxury hover vehicles as our shuttle joined the queue of arrivals. Through tinted windows, I watched Neo Olympus's tech elite emerge from their vehicles in designer evening wear, their animated conversations and confident postures suggesting eager anticipation for tonight's entertainment. The Spire's facade blazed with warm, pulsating lighting that transformed the entrance into a futuristic stage set, complete with a shimmering blue carpet and holographic photographers positioned to capture every arrival for tomorrow's business publications. Silas straightened his bow tie one final time as our driver opened the passenger door, his nervous energy palpable even in the confined space. "Remember to smile for the cameras," he said, though his own expression looked strained beneath the practiced charm. The vintage locket, nestled in my purse, felt heavier with each passing moment, its weight a constant reminder of how completely I had misunderstood tonight's significance. The ballroom doors opened to reveal a scene designed to impress the most jaded observers of corporate excess. Quantum crystal chandeliers suspended from coffered ceilings cast prismatic light across polished obsidian floors, reflecting 300 guests moving through the space with choreographed elegance. Conversations created a symphony of ambition and networking that usually energized me, but tonight, the familiar sounds felt ominous, charged with undercurrents of anticipation that made my skin crawl. Silas's hand settled on my lower back as we entered, a customary gesture, but his eyes immediately began scanning the crowd for someone else. His body language screamed distraction, despite the perfectly rehearsed smile he offered to the holographic photographers capturing our arrival for business journals and society pages. The disconnect between his physical presence beside me and his obvious mental focus elsewhere created an unsettling atmosphere that seemed to subtly affect other guests as well. "Aris, you look stunning tonight," commented Senator Evelyn Reed, a powerful board member whose husband ran one of Neo Olympus's largest orbital transport firms. Her compliment felt perfunctory, delivered while her attention focused on Silas's reactions to various attendees rather than my actual appearance. The subtle shift in social dynamics suggested that others had noticed changes in our marriage long before I had fully acknowledged them myself. Service drones circulated with sparkling ambrosia flutes and molecular gastronomy canapes, representing the kind of catering budget usually reserved for corporate celebrations of major milestones. The investor guest list included names from every significant venture capital firm in the Orion arm, along with representatives from technology companies whose partnerships could transform AetherPulse from a successful startup to an industry leader. The sheer scale of tonight's event suggested purposes far beyond simple anniversary recognition. "There's Cassandra," Silas said, his voice carrying a warmth that made my chest tighten with a painful recognition. Cassandra Vane commanded attention from the moment she entered the ballroom, her presence transforming casual conversations into focused networking opportunities as guests strategically positioned themselves for potential introductions. Her reputation as Neo Olympus's most successful venture capitalist preceded her into every room, but tonight, she seemed to carry an additional aura of authority that suggested special significance for this particular gathering. The dinner service proceeded with military precision, each course timed to maintain conversation flow while building anticipation for the evening's presentations. I found myself seated at the head table beside Silas, with perfect views of the stage where keynote speeches would celebrate another year of AetherPulse growth and innovation. The seating arrangement felt deliberately designed to ensure my visibility during whatever performance had been planned for my benefit. Silas's compad buzzed regularly throughout dinner, each notification creating small flinches that suggested nervousness rather than routine business communication. His responses to my attempts at conversation became increasingly distracted, his attention divided between maintaining appearances at our table and monitoring developments I could not identify. The man sitting beside me had transformed into someone whose motivations and loyalties had shifted in ways that threatened everything familiar about our relationship. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the master of ceremonies, his voice echoing across the ballroom as dessert service concluded and stage lighting shifted to indicate the beginning of formal presentations. "Please join me in welcoming Cassandra Vane, whose vision for strategic partnerships continues to revolutionize how we approach technology investment and innovation." The applause that greeted Cassandra's appearance carried genuine enthusiasm from guests who recognized her profound influence in shaping Neo-Olympus's technology landscape. Her commanding presence as she approached the podium suggested comfort with public speaking and confidence in her message, though something in her expression hinted at purposes far beyond standard investor relations presentations. "Tonight, we celebrate not just financial success, but the personal relationships that make transformative partnerships possible," Cassandra began, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom through wireless microphones that ensured every word reached every corner. Her opening seemed conventional enough, focusing on familiar themes of collaboration and shared vision that characterized most corporate celebrations. My stomach began to drop as her speech shifted into more personal territory, building towards something that made the entire room lean forward in collective anticipation. The energy became electric, charged with what I could only describe as bloodlust disguised as entertainment, 300 guests sensing drama approaching with the primal instincts of predators detecting wounded prey when Cassandra stepped away from the podium and gracefully dropped to one knee, producing a handheld microphone from an unseen pocket. The crowd's collective gasp confirmed my worst fears about tonight's actual purpose. Conversations halted entirely as every guest focused on the stage performance unfolding before them, their expressions suggesting they had been prepared for this moment, while I remained completely unaware of my role in their grotesque entertainment. "Silas Caldwell," Cassandra said, her voice carrying across the obsidian walls with clinical precision, designed for maximum impact. "Will you leave your obsolete, hindering partner, Dr. Aris Thorne, and marry me?" The words struck like physical blows, each syllable calculated for maximum humiliation, while 300 compads emerged simultaneously to capture my destruction in high definition. The public branding of me as obsolete and hindering felt like character assassination, meticulously crafted to justify whatever corporate restructuring would inevitably follow this performance, reducing my identity to an obstacle that needed removal, rather than contributions that deserved recognition. Silas's acceptance came without a flicker of hesitation, his voice strong and clear as he said yes to a woman who had just systematically demolished my dignity in front of Neo-Olympus's most influential business leaders. The word echoed off the obsidian walls like a gunshot, final and irreversible in its implications for both our marriage and my future involvement with the company I had built through my own innovation and determination. The applause that followed sounded like artillery fire in my ears as 300 guests celebrated the systematic destruction of my life, their laughter and cheers echoing through a space that suddenly felt like a coliseum designed for gladiatorial combat. I watched my husband embrace Cassandra while holographic cameras flashed around them, documenting the moment my marriage officially became performance art, designed for someone else's entertainment and corporate advantage. The vintage locket in my purse felt like dead weight, a 25,000 credit symbol of love offered to a man who had just traded me for a better business opportunity. 10 years of marriage dissolved into strategic calculation, leaving me sitting alone at the head table while guests offered congratulations to the couple who had just publicly humiliated me for their own advancement, while the crowd expected tears, a dramatic confrontation, or an emotional collapse that would provide additional entertainment value. I chose something far more dangerous than any of them could have anticipated. Dignified silence that left them hungry for a show I would not provide. My refusal to perform according to their expectations created an uncomfortable energy that began to affect the celebration's momentum. My heels clicked against the polished obsidian as I walked towards the exit, each step measured and deliberate, while conversations halted around me and guests strained to witness the breakdown they had paid to observe. The locket box remained clutched in my hands, no profound gesture of love, but rather evidence of the last kindness I would ever show a man who had mistaken my generosity for weakness and my partnership for subordination. Behind me, Silas and Cassandra continued accepting congratulations from people who had just witnessed a corporate acquisition disguised as a romantic proposal, their celebration growing louder as I disappeared into the Neo-Olympus night. A night that would mark the beginning of their education about who actually controlled the company they thought they had just acquired. The penthouse elevator ascended through 30 floors of silence, each level marking my transition from victim to strategist. The city lights of Neo-Olympus spread beneath me through the glass walls, millions of illuminated windows representing lives continuing their normal patterns while mine underwent a complete reconstruction. The vintage locket remained clutched in my hands, no longer a gift, but evidence of the last gesture I would make as someone else's supporting character. Our front door closed behind me with a finality that seemed to echo through marble hallways, designed to impress visitors who would never come again. The space felt different now, transformed from a shared sanctuary into an operational headquarters for the systematic dismantling of everything Silas thought he controlled. Each piece of custom furniture, every carefully selected artwork, all the symbols of our supposed partnership now revealed themselves as mere props in a performance I had funded without ever truly understanding my role. The wedding photograph on our living room wall, showing two smiling people who believed they were building something together, now mocked me with cruel irony, as only one of them had actually contributed substance. Behind that silver frame lay the wall safe, containing 10 years of meticulous documentation. Legal papers that told the mathematical truth about ownership, innovation, and financial responsibility. My fingers entered the combination with steady precision, each number representing a date that mattered far more than the anniversary we had supposedly celebrated tonight. The incorporation papers spread across our dining table like evidence in a corporate trial, each document bearing my signature as the primary founder, while Silas's name appeared only as a minority stakeholder. The legal language I had drafted, leveraging my unparalleled expertise, created an unbreakable foundation of ownership rights that no amount of charm or public relations could ever overcome. Patent filings meticulously detailed every innovation that generated our wealth, each bearing my name as the primary inventor, alongside technical descriptions that proved I alone possessed the expertise to create breakthrough algorithms. Bank records revealed the source of our initial funding with damning clarity. My grandmother Elara Santos's inheritance had provided the capital that transformed Silas's ambitious ideas into operational reality. Her life savings, invested in a company that would honor her memory through genuine innovation rather than corporate theater. Elara Santos had worked 3 demanding jobs to build something meaningful, leaving me the resources to continue her legacy of authentic achievement, rather than borrowed glory. The 68% ownership stake stared back at me from official papers, a mathematical truth that contradicted every public narrative about our partnership. These documents represented more than legal protection. They were weapons I had never expected to use against the man I had loved and trusted with everything I had built. The irony of preparing to destroy someone using documents I had created to protect our shared future was not lost on me. My datapad connected to AetherPulse Innovation's quantum financial systems with passwords only I knew, revealing the intricate web of authorization protocols I had designed during our early startup days, when trust meant sharing access to everything. The security architecture I had built to protect our company from external threats now became the mechanism for defending against internal betrayal. Every safeguard worked exactly as intended, despite purposes I had never anticipated. The financial records, displayed with spreadsheet precision, told the story of systematic exploitation that had funded Silas's transformation from startup founder to celebrated entrepreneur. 27 million credits in personal expenses appeared in detailed transaction records, each orbital vacation disguised as business development, every consulting fee that somehow involved 5-star resorts on distant moons, all the executive perks that had built his reputation while diminishing our company's actual operational capabilities. European investor tours, Caribbean strategy retreats, Neo-Olympus networking events that cost more than most companies' annual budgets. The documentation revealed a pattern of spending that treated corporate funds as personal checking accounts, while I worked 18-hour days to generate the revenue that funded his extravagant lifestyle. Every receipt told the story of a man who had confused access with ownership, who had mistaken my generosity for weakness. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I realized that the woman who built the system retained ultimate authority over how it operated. The authorization protocols I had designed would now serve justice with the same precision they had once provided protection. Each security measure became a tool for the systematic dismantling of access Silas had never actually earned through his own contributions. The network shutdown began with surgical precision. Each frozen account represented years of stolen credit and misplaced trust. Travel bookings disappeared from reservation systems as corporate credit cards lost authorization for future transactions. The European investor tour Silas had planned with Cassandra evaporated into digital nothingness, along with hotel reservations, private jet charters, and restaurant bookings that would have continued his performance of success, funded by my innovations. Corporate cards declined across multiple merchant systems as I revoked authorization for personal expenses that had masqueraded as business development. The operational freeze locked 27 million credits behind protocols that required my personal approval, instantly transforming the celebrated CEO into someone who could not access a single credit of the company he claimed to run. Each keystroke represented justice served with mathematical precision. Consequences delivered through systems I had designed when partnership meant collaboration rather than exploitation. My compad began buzzing with panicked calls as vendors, employees, and business partners discovered that AetherPulse innovations had suddenly become unavailable for all financial transactions. The frequency of notifications suggested word was spreading quickly through networks of suppliers and service providers who depended on our company for payment. Silas's assistant, Marcus Bellwether, would be fielding increasingly frantic inquiries about declined payments and frozen accounts, his explanations becoming more desperate as he realized the true scope of the financial lockdown. The legal document I drafted represented the culmination of everything I had learned during years of building companies and protecting intellectual property. Each clause was designed to systematically dismantle the life Silas had built on my work, written with the same precision I once used to code our most complex algorithms. The terms would reshape his understanding of ownership, contribution, and consequence with legal language that left no room for negotiation or misinterpretation. Immediate resignation as CEO would strip away the title that had provided a platform for accepting credit he had never earned. A permanent ban on Cassandra Vane's involvement with AetherPulse innovations would eliminate the external threat that had orchestrated tonight's corporate coup, disguised as romantic theater. 27 million credits in structured repayment over 4 years would ensure accountability for every personal expense he had charged to company accounts while claiming to build our empire. Public acknowledgement of my true role as founder would correct the historical record that had celebrated him as a visionary entrepreneur while relegating me to a supporting character in my own success story. The comprehensive non-disclosure agreement would prevent him from writing memoirs, giving interviews, or speaking at conferences about experiences he had never actually lived, innovations he had never created, or business decisions he had never made. The envelope sat sealed on our coffee table like a legal explosive device, containing mathematical proof that actions have consequences and that the woman who built the theater retains authority to decide who performs on its stage. Each page represented justice served with a precision that would make my grandmother Elara proud, accountability delivered through documentation that proved authentic achievement always overcomes borrowed glory when legal reality confronts manufactured perception. The combination of technical expertise, legal knowledge, and financial control I possessed would now serve purposes I had never intended when building systems designed to protect rather than punish. But Silas had chosen performance over partnership, and Cassandra had orchestrated humiliation disguised as entertainment. Now they would both discover that mathematical truth eventually overcomes even the most sophisticated public relations campaigns. The morning sun cast geometric patterns across our marble floors through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the sealed envelope that would reshape Silas's understanding of ownership and consequence. I had slept surprisingly well for someone who had just orchestrated the systematic dismantling of her husband's empire. The peace of finally taking action replaced years of growing resentment with something approaching profound satisfaction. My coffee tasted better than it had in months, each sip representing freedom from pretending that performance and partnership were equivalent. The intercom buzzed at precisely 9:15. Patrick's voice carried through the speaker with a professional concern that suggested unusual circumstances. Dr. Thorne, there's a gentleman here from AetherPulse Innovations, Marcus Bellwether. He seems quite distressed and insists he needs to speak with you immediately about urgent company matters. The timing was perfect, allowing Silas's assistant to discover the scope of last night's consequences during normal business hours, when the impact would reverberate through every vendor, partner, and stakeholder who depended on our company for financial transactions. Marcus emerged from the elevator looking like someone who had survived a natural disaster. His usually immaculate appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and the wild-eyed desperation of a man whose professional world had collapsed overnight. His designer suit, typically pressed to perfection, showed wrinkles that suggested he had slept in his office while fielding increasingly panicked calls from vendors whose payments had mysteriously evaporated. Dark circles under his eyes indicated the kind of sleepless night that comes from discovering that systems you thought you understood were actually controlled by someone else entirely. Dr. Thorne, he said, his voice cracking with exhaustion and barely controlled panic. We have a situation, multiple situations. Everything is frozen. He clutched a coffee cup with hands that shook so violently, I worried he might drop it on our marble floor, the caffeine clearly insufficient to combat whatever pharmaceutical assistance he had needed to function after discovering the scope of his employer's financial paralysis. I gestured for him to sit on our Italian leather sofa, noting how he perched on the edge like someone prepared to flee at the first sign of additional bad news. Tell me exactly what you've discovered, I said, settling into the opposite chair with the calm authority of someone who knew precisely what information he would provide, because I had designed every aspect of the crisis he was experiencing. The corporate credit card started declining around midnight, Marcus began, his words tumbling over each other with the desperation of someone delivering bad news to the only person who might possess solutions. Hotel reservations for the European investor tour were cancelled automatically. The payroll system shows insufficient authorization for this week's employee payments. Vendor invoices are being rejected by our accounting software. Even basic office supply orders are getting declined. His face cycled through confusion, recognition, and growing horror as he continued cataloging the financial apocalypse. The conference room booking for today's emergency board meeting was cancelled because our corporate account couldn't process the payment. 3 investors have already called asking why their money transfers for the new funding round are showing authorization errors. And Cassandra Vane's office has been calling every hour demanding explanations for why her consulting fee payment was reversed. Can you fix this? He pleaded, still believing this represented a technical glitch rather than precision warfare designed by the woman who had built every system he was describing. Silas said you would know how to restore access to the operational accounts. He mentioned something about security protocols you designed that might have malfunctioned during last night's network updates. I watched his growing horror as understanding dawned, that he was not dealing with technical failures, but with consequences for actions taken at last night's gala. Marcus, I said with the patience of someone explaining basic mathematics to a child, there are no technical glitches. There are no malfunctioning security protocols. The system is working exactly as I designed it to work. The envelope containing Silas's terms of surrender sat on our coffee table like legal ordnance. Each page represented the systematic dismantling of assumptions about ownership, authority, and access that had governed AetherPulse Innovations for the past 10 years. I handed the sealed packet to Marcus, watching his face transform as he realized he was carrying a corporate death sentence disguised as legal documentation. Tell Silas the system is working exactly as designed, I said with the calm authority of someone who had spent 10 years watching her innovations attributed to others while funding their lifestyle through algorithms they could not understand or replicate. These documents contain his new reality. He has 24 hours to respond. Marcus accepted the envelope like someone handling radioactive material, his hands trembling as he understood that he was carrying news that would redefine Silas's relationship with the company he thought he controlled. What should I tell the employees, the vendors, the investors who are demanding explanations for declined payments and cancelled meetings? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tell them the truth, I replied, my gaze steady. Tell them that sometimes when you mistake access for ownership, you discover that the person who built the system retains ultimate authority over how it operates. Tell them that mathematical truth eventually overcomes even the most sophisticated public relations campaigns. The elevator doors closed on a man who finally understood that supporting characters sometimes write their own scripts, his footsteps echoing through the hallway as he carried news that would transform Silas's understanding of who actually owned the empire he had claimed to run. Marcus looked like a messenger in a war zone, which in many ways accurately described his new role in the corporate conflict that was just beginning. My compad had been buzzing constantly since 6 o'clock this morning, the notifications creating a digital symphony of panic as Silas's world crumbled in real time. 27 missed calls within the first 3 hours, each representing another piece of his carefully constructed facade falling apart as vendors, partners, and investors discovered that their golden boy could not access the funds needed to maintain his professional reputation. Cassandra Vane's name appeared repeatedly between calls from board members who were learning that last night's romantic theater had been performed without understanding the financial architecture that made such gestures possible. Investment partners were discovering that their new business relationship with Silas depended on resources he had never actually controlled, corporate accounts that required authorization from someone who had no intention of enabling their continued exploitation. I silenced the device and placed it face down on our dining table, savoring the mathematical precision of consequences unfolding exactly as I had designed them. The quiet in our penthouse felt sacred after years of noise and performance, the first genuine peace I had experienced since Silas forgot that partnerships require recognition rather than systematic erasure. Each unanswered call represented justice served with algorithmic efficiency, accountability delivered through systems I had built when trust meant collaboration rather than exploitation. The business partners who had celebrated Silas's transformation from married entrepreneur to available acquisition target were discovering that corporate romance required resources the lover had never possessed. Cassandra's investment strategy was unraveling as she learned that Silas's access to AetherPulse operational funds had been a privilege rather than a right, an authorization that could be revoked by the person who had actually built the company being acquired. The afternoon passed in contemplative satisfaction as I reviewed patent applications for innovations that would revolutionize quantum machine learning applications in interstellar navigation. My technical work continued with a focused intensity that had been missing during years of watching Silas accept credit for breakthroughs he could not explain to investors who assumed his public recognition reflected actual expertise rather than borrowed glory. At 11:45 that evening, desperate knocking echoed through our penthouse as Silas returned home, transformed from tech royalty to emotional wreckage. The sound carried the frantic rhythm of someone whose perfect plan had become a perfect disaster, whose corporate acquisition, disguised as romance, had backfired with mathematical precision that left no room for negotiation or appeal. I opened the door to find a man who had spent 12 hours calling lawyers, accountants, and anyone else who might explain how his carefully orchestrated coup had resulted in complete financial paralysis. His designer suit showed wrinkles that suggested he had been sleeping in his office, his confident demeanor replaced by a wild desperation that made him almost unrecognizable as the person who had accepted Cassandra's proposal with such authority less than 24 hours earlier. "You cannot destroy us like this," he whispered, the words revealing a fundamental delusion that there remained in us to destroy, when in reality there had not been a genuine partnership for years, only performance art funded by my innovation and protected by his willful blindness to mathematical truth about ownership and contribution. Silas stepped across the threshold of our penthouse like a man entering his own tomb. His designer suit wrinkled beyond recognition, and his confident demeanor completely shattered. The elevator ride up 30 floors had apparently given him time to rehearse explanations that sounded increasingly desperate with each word he spoke. His hands shook as he closed the door behind him, the simple action requiring visible effort from someone whose world had collapsed in the span of 12 hours. "Aris, we need to talk," he said, his voice carrying the hollow authority of someone who had forgotten that authority requires actual power rather than assumed privilege. The marble floors amplified each footstep as he moved through our living room, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against surfaces that my algorithms had purchased while he attended networking dinners disguised as strategic planning sessions. I remained seated on our sofa, the legal documents spread across the coffee table between us like evidence in a corporate trial. The vintage locket sat unopened beside the surrender terms, its velvet box serving as a reminder of how completely I had misunderstood my role in tonight's performance until discovering the truth about months of coordinated deception. "You have to understand," Silas began, his words tumbling over each other with the desperation of someone whose carefully rehearsed explanations were crumbling under pressure. "Cassandra's proposal was not what it seemed. It was a test, a way to make you fight for our marriage and prove your commitment to our partnership. She said you had become too comfortable, too complacent about what we built together." The delusion embedded in his explanation cut deeper than any betrayal could have managed. I watched him pace our living room while constructing elaborate justifications for systematic humiliation, his mind apparently capable of transforming corporate acquisition strategy into relationship therapy through sheer force of denial. The man who had stood on stage accepting congratulations for my innovations was now trying to convince me that public devastation had been designed for my own benefit. "Silas," I said, my voice steady with the patience of someone explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow student, "you spent 27 million credits of my money. The math is not complicated." The documentation spread across our coffee table told a story that no amount of creative explanation could alter. Each receipt represented corporate funds treated as personal checking accounts, every authorization revealing a pattern of systematic exploitation that had funded his lifestyle while I worked 18-hour days to generate the revenue he was spending. European investor tours that cost more than most companies' annual budgets. Caribbean strategy retreats disguised as business development. Neo-Olympus networking events that achieved nothing beyond building his social connections at my company's expense. "That was our money," Silas protested, his voice rising with each failed attempt to justify the unjustifiable. "Joint assets from our shared success. Partnership means sharing resources and opportunities." I pulled out the incorporation papers I had drafted using legal expertise he had never possessed, the legal language establishing ownership percentages that contradicted every assumption about our business relationship. "I own 68% of AetherPulse Innovations. You own 32%. These documents bear my signature as primary founder, while your name appears only as minority stakeholder. Patent filings detailed every innovation that generated our wealth, each bearing my name as primary inventor, alongside technical descriptions that proved I alone possessed the expertise to create breakthrough algorithms. Bank records showed my grandmother Elara's inheritance as the initial funding that had transformed his ambitious ideas into operational reality. Every credit traced directly to investments I had made when partnership meant collaboration rather than systematic exploitation. "The company belongs to both of us," Silas insisted, though his protests crumbled against mathematical evidence that ownership was not determined by public relations campaigns or magazine profiles. 10 years of building this together. 10 years of shared sacrifice and mutual support. Shared sacrifice? I asked, noting how the phrase sounded increasingly hollow when applied to someone whose contributions had consisted primarily of accepting credit for work he could not replicate or explain. "You built a reputation on innovations you cannot debug. You gave keynote speeches about algorithms you cannot understand. You accepted awards for breakthroughs you did not create." The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Technical documentation proved that every system generating our revenue had been designed during my sleepless nights of coding, while Silas managed strategic partnerships at exclusive conferences. Financial records showed that every credit of initial funding had come from my grandmother's inheritance, invested in a company that honored her legacy of authentic achievement rather than borrowed glory. When Silas suggested using Cassandra's recorded proposal as leverage against her, I pulled out my compad and deleted the video in front of him, watching his last hope for redemption disappear into digital nothingness. The action was deliberate and final, demonstrating that I possessed something far more powerful than embarrassing footage. "I do not need blackmail," I told him, my voice carrying the steady authority of someone who held ownership papers, patent filings, and 10 years of documentation proving exactly who built this company and who merely pretended to run it. "I have mathematical truth." His face crumpled as understanding finally penetrated the elaborate justifications he had constructed to avoid confronting his own irrelevance to the company's actual operations. The video deletion was not mercy but strategy, proof that I did not need to destroy others to reclaim what had always been mine through innovation, funding, and legal ownership. The surrender document represented the culmination of everything I had learned about protecting intellectual property and corporate governance. Each clause was written with surgical precision, designed to systematically dismantle the life Silas had built on my work, while ensuring he could never again exploit innovations he had not created or funding he had not provided. "You cannot be serious about these terms," Silas said, his voice breaking as he read through immediate resignation as CEO, permanent ban on Cassandra's involvement, 27 million credits in structured repayment, public acknowledgement of my true role as founder, and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that would silence him completely. "Every clause reflects the mathematical reality of ownership and contribution," I replied, watching him struggle with concepts that should have been obvious to anyone actually involved in building a company rather than merely performing the role of successful entrepreneur. "Sign the documents or face litigation that will make tonight's financial freeze seem generous." Silas's hands trembled as he signed each page, his pen moving with the desperate efficiency of someone who finally understood they had been playing poker with the casino owner. Every initial and signature represented another piece of his carefully constructed identity crumbling under the weight of legal reality, each clause cutting away access to an empire I had built while he managed strategic partnerships at five-star resorts. I watched him accept terms that would reshape his understanding of ownership, contribution, and consequence. The resignation stripped away titles that had provided a platform for accepting credit he had never earned. The financial repayment ensured accountability for every personal expense charged to company accounts. The public acknowledgement would correct historical records that had celebrated him as a visionary entrepreneur while relegating me to a supporting character in my own success story. The comprehensive non-disclosure agreement represented perhaps the most devastating clause, preventing him from writing memoirs, giving interviews, or speaking at conferences about experiences he had never actually lived. The man who had built his reputation on borrowed glory would spend the next 5 years in enforced silence, unable to monetize stories about innovations he had not created or business decisions he had not made. The documents became his confession, a legal admission that 10 years of stolen credit were finally being returned to their rightful owner. Each signature acknowledged that mathematical truth eventually overcomes even the most sophisticated public relations campaigns, that authentic achievement always prevails when legal reality confronts manufactured perception. As Silas completed the final signature, the transformation from celebrated entrepreneur to minority stakeholder in a company he had never actually controlled was complete. The perfect life we had constructed together revealed itself as performance art funded by my innovation and protected by his willful blindness to ownership documents that had always told a different story than the one he presented to investors and business journalists. The signed documents lay scattered across our coffee table like the remnants of Silas's former identity, each page bearing his signature acknowledging the mathematical reality of ownership and contribution that had always governed AetherPulse Innovations. His departure from our penthouse felt anticlimactic after the systematic dismantling of everything he thought he controlled, the elevator doors closing on a man who finally understood the difference between access and authority, between performance and actual achievement. The emergency board meeting convened at 8 o'clock in the morning, barely 6 hours after Silas had signed his surrender. The glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor of our office building felt like a corporate tribunal where the verdict had already been decided. 10 board members arranged themselves around the gleaming mahogany table with expressions ranging from confusion to carefully concealed panic. Their expensive suits and practiced confidence could not mask the fundamental uncertainty of people who had just discovered they had been supporting the wrong player in a game whose rules they had never actually understood. I entered the boardroom with the manila folder containing the complete restructuring of AetherPulse Innovations, my heels clicking against marble floors with the measured rhythm of justice finally being served. The board members who had spent 10 years deferring to Silas's charm and networking abilities now faced the woman who had actually built the company they thought they were governing. Their nervous glances suggested a belated recognition of how completely they had misunderstood the power dynamics within their own organization. "Good morning," I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table that had always belonged to me by right of majority ownership, though I had allowed Silas to occupy it for appearances that no longer mattered. We have significant changes to discuss regarding AetherPulse Innovation's leadership structure and operational authority. Senator Evelyn Reed, our longest-serving board member, spoke first with the careful tone of someone navigating unexpectedly treacherous territory. Dr. Thorne, we understand there have been some developments following last night's Galactic Frontiers Gala. Silas mentioned urgent matters requiring board attention, but he was somewhat unclear about specifics. The understatement would have been amusing if the situation had not been so serious. Silas's 12 hours of frantic comm calls to lawyers, accountants, and crisis management consultants had apparently failed to produce coherent explanations for the systematic financial paralysis that had transformed AetherPulse Innovations from an operational company to a corporate ghost overnight. Silas Caldwell has submitted his immediate resignation as CEO of AetherPulse Innovations, I announced, my voice carrying the surgical precision of someone delivering a medical diagnosis. Effective immediately, I am assuming sole control of all company operations, with comprehensive veto authority over expenditures, strategic partnerships, and personnel decisions. The silence that followed felt heavy with implications that board members were only beginning to calculate. 10 years of deference to Silas's public persona had created assumptions about authority and decision-making that were now crumbling under the weight of legal documentation that told a completely different story about ownership and control. Furthermore, I continued, noting how each sentence cut through the boardroom's tension like a scalpel, Cassandra Vane and all entities associated with her investment group are permanently banned from any involvement with AetherPulse Innovations, including consulting arrangements, partnership discussions, or casual contact with company personnel. The corporate death sentence hung in the air while board members began calculating how this fundamental reshuffling would affect their own positions, stock options, and professional reputations. The mathematical elegance of ownership papers was overcoming years of public relations and networking, proving that documentation defeats charm when legal reality collides with manufactured perception. David Park, our technology advisor, cleared his throat with obvious discomfort. Dr. Thorne, these are significant changes. Perhaps we should schedule additional meetings to discuss the implications and ensure proper transition procedures. I opened the manila folder and distributed copies of the incorporation papers, patent filings, and financial records that had always governed our company's actual structure. The documents you are reviewing establish that I own 68% of AetherPulse Innovations, while Silas owns 32%. Every innovation generating our revenue bears my name as primary inventor. All initial funding came from my personal resources. The revelation transformed the boardroom atmosphere as sophisticated investors discovered they had fundamentally misunderstood the company they had been advising for years. Patent filings proved that breakthrough algorithms credited to visionary leadership had actually been developed by someone they had treated as a supportive spouse rather than a brilliant entrepreneur. Silas will be making a public statement to correct the historical record, I announced, producing the confession he had signed hours earlier. The statement acknowledges my role as founder, architect, and majority stakeholder of AetherPulse Innovations, along with his resignation from all operational responsibilities. The document I read aloud became Silas's final humiliation as board members listened to a complete confession that dissolved 10 years of stolen credit in carefully crafted paragraphs. His voice, recorded during our penthouse confrontation, cracked with each admission that he had been the spokesperson while I did the actual work of building something meaningful. I acknowledge that Dr. Aris Thorne is the true founder and majority owner of AetherPulse Innovations, the statement read. She developed our core algorithms, filed our patents, and made the strategic decisions that built this company. I served as a public representative while she provided the technical expertise and innovative vision that generated our success. Board members watched in fascination and horror as the confession continued, transforming a celebrated entrepreneur into a corporate fraud in the space of a single press release. Each paragraph represented a nail in the coffin of Silas's carefully constructed reputation, demonstrating that mathematical truth eventually overcomes even the most sophisticated public relations campaigns. The technical innovations credited to our leadership team were designed and implemented by Dr. Aris Thorne during 18-hour development cycles while I managed external relationships and investor communications. Her contributions to artificial intelligence and quantum machine learning represent genuine breakthrough achievements that I had the privilege of presenting to business audiences. The confession became a masterclass in consequence, proof that authentic achievement always prevails when legal reality confronts manufactured perception. Board members realized they were witnessing the systematic correction of historical records that had celebrated borrowed glory while diminishing actual innovation. As sole CEO of AetherPulse Innovations, my first executive decisions prioritized substance over style, replacing champagne-fueled networking events with actual engineering excellence and meaningful innovation. The employees who had worked under Silas's regime discovered what it meant to have leadership that understood the technology they were developing. Their relief was palpable as technical discussions became substantive rather than superficial performance art. Effective immediately, we are restructuring our development priorities to focus on breakthrough applications rather than public relations opportunities, I announced to the engineering teams who had been marginalized while Silas chased magazine covers and conference speaking engagements. Your technical expertise will guide our strategic direction rather than being subordinated to networking and social media considerations. The office atmosphere transformed from performance art to productive collaboration within hours of Silas's departure. Engineers who had been presenting complex ideas to someone who could only smile and nod during technical reviews suddenly found themselves working with leadership that could debug their code, optimize their algorithms, and contribute meaningfully to problem-solving discussions. Dr. Lena Kim, my former assistant who possessed one of the most brilliant minds in quantum machine learning optimization, accepted a promotion to Chief Technology Officer with an enthusiasm that had been suppressed during years of watching her innovations attributed to Silas's visionary leadership. Her first presentation to the board detailed breakthrough developments in hyperquantum entanglement architecture that would revolutionize predictive analytics across multiple industries. The transformation of AetherPulse Innovations from corporate theater to an authentic innovation hub felt like restoration rather than revolution, returning the company to principles that had originally motivated my grandmother's investment in meaningful achievement rather than borrowed glory. Mathematical truth had finally overcome manufactured perception, establishing operational priorities based on genuine expertise rather than social media presence. The board meeting concluded with unanimous approval of the leadership transition, their signatures acknowledging that they had been governing a company they had never actually understood until legal documentation forced recognition of ownership structures that had always told a different story than the one presented to business journalists and industry publications. The board members filed out of the conference room with the subdued efficiency that follows major corporate restructuring. Their conversations muted as they processed the fundamental shift in leadership and the revelation that they had been advising a company they had never truly understood. The glass walls of our executive floor reflected the morning sunlight streaming through Neo Olympus's financial district, illuminating an office space that would now operate according to principles of authentic innovation rather than performance art disguised as entrepreneurship. 9 months later, I found myself standing in a completely different kitchen, brewing coffee with equipment I had purchased myself rather than corporate accounts funded by algorithms I had coded during sleepless nights. The Cambridge townhouse represented everything the Neo Olympus penthouse had not: comfort over appearances, functionality over Instagram potential, genuine satisfaction over manufactured luxury. Each piece of furniture reflected choices made for personal preference rather than investor impressions, creating spaces designed for living rather than performing. The morning light filtered through windows I could open to actual fresh air, a simple pleasure that had been impossible in the climate-controlled environment of our former penthouse. The coffee maker was a modest German model that produced excellent results without requiring technical expertise or pretentious explanations about single-origin beans and artisanal roasting processes. Everything in my new environment reflected values that prioritized substance over style, authenticity over appearances. My MIT visiting professorship had connected me with graduate students whose genuine curiosity about quantum machine learning frameworks reminded me why I had fallen in love with programming before it became entangled with patents, profit margins, and public relations campaigns. These young minds approached complex algorithms with the same pure passion I had experienced during my early coding sessions, when breakthrough technology felt like art and elegant solutions represented pure intellectual satisfaction. Professor Thorne, your approach to hyperquantum network optimization has opened entirely new research directions for our celestial navigation applications, said Dr. Kai Leng, a doctoral candidate whose dissertation would revolutionize diagnostic imaging through artificial intelligence. His enthusiasm for technical excellence rather than networking opportunities represented everything I had hoped to find in academic collaboration. The absence of staff, marble countertops, and performance art disguised as domestic life had created space for the quiet satisfaction of finally matching my environment to my actual values. No longer did I wake up in surroundings designed to impress visitors who viewed my home as a set piece in someone else's success story. Every detail of my new life reflected authentic choices rather than corporate image management. AetherPulse Labs, a new division I founded, represented everything Silas's version of AetherPulse innovations had never been: substance over style, innovation over networking, solutions over social media presence. Dr. Lena Kim's leadership of the Distributed Quantum Computing Initiative had attracted contracts with 3 major aerospace systems and 2 Fortune 500 companies. Their success was measured in solved problems rather than magazine profiles or conference keynotes. The $50 million credit investment I had made in AetherPulse Labs generated returns measured in human impact rather than shareholder value, funding research that would revolutionize cosmic exploration and climate modeling rather than producing quarterly reports designed to impress investors who had never understood the technology they were funding. Watching brilliant minds collaborate on breakthrough applications reminded me of my own early days, when code was poetry and technological innovation represented art rather than business strategy. The distributed quantum computing framework we developed will reduce celestial mapping processing time from hours to minutes, Lena explained during our quarterly review meeting. 3 orbital stations are already reporting improved data accuracy through faster identification of anomalies. Her passion for technical excellence rather than public recognition represented the kind of leadership I should have been supporting all along. Instead of funding Silas's transformation from entrepreneur to corporate celebrity through innovations he could not understand or replicate, the handwritten letter from Silas arrived on a Tuesday morning, his careful script acknowledging a recognition that had come too late to preserve the relationship he had systematically destroyed through years of systematic credit theft. The Neo Olympus Community College, where he now taught entrepreneurship, provided modest compensation that reflected his actual contributions to business education rather than borrowed glory from innovations he had never created. I realize now that you tried to teach me the difference between being important and being authentic for years, he wrote in handwriting that looked older than his actual age, suggesting the kind of stress that comes from discovering that your entire professional identity was built on foundations someone else had constructed. I apologize that it took losing everything to finally understand what you meant about genuine achievement versus performance art. His modest department and reduced circumstances represented the natural consequences of building a career on borrowed innovation rather than personal expertise, his belated recognition of my contributions carrying the heavy weight of someone who finally understood what he had lost through his own choices. The $27 million credit repayment plan was progressing according to schedule, each monthly payment representing accountability for corporate funds he had treated as personal checking accounts while I built the empire he had claimed to run. Cassandra's situation provided its own lesson in due diligence as she explained to limited partners how her acquisition strategy had backfired when she failed to research actual ownership structures before orchestrating public humiliation designed to transfer control of a company she had never actually understood. Her reputation remained intact, but her business model had been permanently damaged by assumptions that public perception equals legal reality when corporate documentation tells a different story. The Caldwell acquisition demonstrates the importance of comprehensive ownership research before implementing partnership strategies, she had written in a carefully worded statement to investors who were questioning her judgment after discovering that her romantic theater had been performed without understanding the mathematical foundations of the company she had attempted to acquire. Standing in my honest kitchen, brewing my own coffee, I understood that the best revenge had never been about destroying others, but about finally living authentically on my own terms, building meaningful things with people who actually cared about outcomes rather than appearances. The vintage locket still sat unopened on my counter, a 25,000 credit reminder of the last gesture I had made as someone else's supporting character before choosing to write my own script according to values that prioritized genuine accomplishment over borrowed glory. Silas and Cassandra had faced consequences that reflected their own choices, but my victory was not their punishment. It was my reconstruction of a life based on authentic achievement rather than corporate performance art. The mathematics had worked perfectly. Actions plus consequences equals justice, served with the precision that only comes from understanding that the person who builds the system gets to decide how it operates. The morning routine in my Cambridge townhouse represented everything I had hoped to achieve through years of building technology that mattered. The quiet satisfaction of meaningful work, genuine relationships with people who valued substance over style, and the peace that comes from finally matching your environment to your actual values rather than someone else's expectations. My grandmother Elara's inheritance had funded authentic innovation rather than borrowed glory, honoring her memory through breakthrough technology that solved real problems instead of generating magazine profiles for people who had never understood the algorithms they claimed to have created. Elara Santos would have been proud to see her granddaughter finally claiming credit for work that represented a genuine contribution to human knowledge rather than performance art disguised as entrepreneurship. The coffee tasted better when brewed with equipment purchased through honest earnings rather than corporate accounts funded by innovations attributed to someone else. Each morning represented another day of living authentically rather than performing roles designed to make other people successful through my invisible contributions. The mathematics of justice had proven that genuine achievement always prevails when legal documentation confronts manufactured perception, and sometimes, the best revenge is simply being right, while having the evidence to prove it. If this story of cosmic betrayal and a phoenix-like rise from the ashes resonated with your soul, please hit that like button to show your support. My most profound moment was realizing that the universe of my love had been a stage for a business deal, not a true partnership. What part of Aris's journey ignited your spirit the most? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I read every single one. Don't let your own stories of silenced brilliance fade into the background. Subscribe and activate that notification bell to join our community, where we celebrate women who reclaim their power, their truth, and their destiny, one empowering story at a time. Let's build a future where authentic achievement always shines brightest.